After a long offseason, the NFL is finally back. The season opener is tonight, and the main slate lies just around the corner. We have got updated scoring rules to discuss. We have got a juicy main slate, which does include the Sunday night hammer between the Lions and the Rams, and a pretty fun slate overall. We're here today to break down the top DFS plays to kick off the 2024 NFL DFS season. Welcome on into the Heat Check, a FanDuel Research podcast. My name is Jim Sonis. I am a managing editor at FanDuel Research, joined here as I will be every Thursday by Brandon Gdula. Check him out on X at Gdula13. You can find his work at FanDuel Research, where he is a senior managing editor. Brandon, offseason is officially over. The NFL is back. How you doing today?
Good. It's been a long time since we talked football. We've talked golf all summer, but they're a little bit different shows. The football show, there's a little more to cover, a little more to it, but every year for week one I just feel underprepared because there's no end to the rumors, the usage, this wide receiver played these snaps with the first unit, like trying to figure all that out. But I've tried in the past to dig so hard into that stuff and kind of know everything. And then it comes down to like week one and you're building lineups and you're just like, do I trust this report or do I want to make sure I'm targeting players I know are going to have roles? It's so easy at this time to dig in to like the value receivers or potentially a value running back who might lead his team in carries. But at the end of the day, like, are you going to trust that? You're going to trust yourself. So like, that's kind of where I've been the past, really since Monday, as I really start digging in, building lineups and trying to think things through. So, but yeah, I'm excited to put all of that into podcast form with you.
I am as well. It's been fun to dig into the data. Obviously, it's a lot of data to dig through, as you said. And, we're just going to see how things play out here for week one. But as mentioned, it is a pretty fun slate. We got 4 games that are in the stack zone with pretty high totals and spreads that are close enough for this as well. 3 of those spreads are very, very close, and that's what we want from a DFS perspective. So it should be a fun setup for this week. We're going to break down game stacks. We'll talk through key injuries or hold-ins, holdouts impacting the slate. We'll talk about the scoring rules changes over at FanDuel.com and more to get you ready for this week one main slate. But first, a reminder to make sure you're subscribed to the FanDuel Research Podcast feed wherever you get your podcast. We'll be here every Thursday live on the FanDuel YouTube page at 10 a.m. Eastern, breaking down that week's main DFS slate. No recap shows this year, instead doing an article version of that show, which will be up on FanDuel.com/research on Monday morning. So check that out there instead. FanDuel.com/research for that. But the preview shows will still be up every Thursday, 10 a.m. Eastern on the FanDuel YouTube page, up on FanDuel TV Plus after that. And of course, the FanDuel Research Podcast feed. Search for FanDuel Research Podcast wherever you get your podcasts, but also check out FanDuel TV Plus by going to FanDuel.com/watch. Log in with your FanDuel account to watch Up and Adams. You can watch Covering the Spread, Ringer Wise Guys on Sundays as well. Whole lot of good stuff in the same place. FanDuel.com/watch, covering the spread there as well. And then log in a FanDuel account or get the FanDuel TV Plus app on your Amazon Fire, Apple TV, or Roku device. Football is back, and there's no better place to get in on the NFL action than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, all customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. Plus, with FanDuel, you don't even have to leave the app to access real-time stats and data to help you make even more winning bets. Download FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Must be 21 plus and present in select states or 18 plus and present in DC. Offer ends 9/22/24. After a 3-week free trial, the full price of NFL Sunday Ticket will be automatically charged seasonally. Cancel anytime, no refunds. Terms, restrictions, and embargoes apply. YouTube TV base plan required to watch YouTube TV. Redemption requires a Google account and current form of payment. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit fanduel.com/RG. Call 1-888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org/chat in Connecticut. Visit mdgamblinghelp.org in Maryland. Hope is here. Visit gamblinghelplinema.org or call 800-327-5050 for 24/7 support in Massachusetts, or call 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY in New York. Let's begin things here by taking a top-down view of the Week 1 main slate and digging into our slate overview. Brandon, you kind of alluded to this earlier on, but there's a lot to parse through with a Week 1 DFS main slate. So when you look at this slate, what are the key things that stand out to you, key decision points, things like that?
Yeah, I would say you mentioned the 4 games that stand out in terms of total. It's sifting through those and trying to get those right. But for me, and this isn't, I know how this will sound like it's not the most helpful thing right now, but it's really figuring out what I believe is going to happen with particular teams, players. Okay, Team X has a new offensive coordinator. How much does that change? It also depends on their personnel. They can't just change things and do stuff unless it's just running the ball. I think teams that offensive coordinators that just want to run the ball, they can take the ball out of the hands of their potentially very talented quarterback, like we might see for the Chargers. But at the end of the day, when you can hype up certain players, certain situations, this is why I don't think it's like the most helpful, but I'll talk through where I see certain things. It comes down to you, like in Week 1. We historically do trends on Week 1, and I don't want to say that the level of variance, I guess, in terms of the sportsbook odds in Week 1, and you can really zig where everyone's zagging. You can differentiate more where you think things are different. And it's figuring out those things, for me for Week 1. So I think more and more will come to light. As always, we do our prep, we have our thoughts, we talk through this, and then things start to become clearer. So yeah, I think that's kind of my big, my obstacle that I'm trying to get over for Week 1.
Yeah. For me, it all comes down to gauging upside, and that's always like the toughest thing, because I can get really excited about a guy playing 35 of 35 snaps with the first team offense in the preseason, but will he earn targets? I don't know. Great question. And it's kind of making sure the value that I like is legitimate value with a ceiling. Because no matter how low the salary is, you still need a ceiling out of that player in order to get that first place prize. Unless you're playing cash games, then you still want ceiling, but not as big of an emphasis there. But for us, we're talking primarily about tournaments where you want that 90th percentile outcome. What do you get if you get that 90th percentile outcome? Is it 15 FanDuel points? I'm good, man. I think that I want a bit more juice than that. Maybe a tight end, that's fine. But I want to make sure I've got running backs who can give me 20. I want receivers who can get me 18, 15, 20, somewhere in that range. 85 yards or 2 touchdowns is typically the threshold in order to make a FanDuel DFS perfect lineup. I want the guys that I'm using to have that in the range of outcomes. And honestly, it may sound like I'm stressing about this, but I do think I can fill out a lineup I like while meeting that criteria for this week and getting to some studs who I know, because they've proven this, have legitimate ceilings. So to me, as it is every week, ceiling is a big concern, and kind of identifying players who I can, feel good about having a path to a lot of yardage or touchdowns working in their favor as well.
Yeah, and we talk, the phrase we use is mistake erasers. Like, you're going to make mistakes in a lineup. And I think that's basically marrying what I said with what you said, is like, you want upside. And I also want to make sure I'm not getting overconfident in players who, sure, someone might be the team's wide receiver too, but if he's got a 12% market share, like, what does that get us? Probably not a whole lot. We'll talk more about that too when we dig into bonuses, which are new on FanDuel this year, which is going to, increase the emphasis of ceiling. But if you get 35 from a player, whether it's sure, Josh Allen could do it, and yes, he's the highest salary quarterback, I understand that, but you get 30, 35, even 25 from players, like, that matters.
Yep.
And if you go into a lineup knowing this player can't get 25. Maybe these two players can't get 25, but I've got, it's really hard to justify. And that's always where we're coming from. That might be, if you're listening, that might be different than your philosophy. But I think Jim and I are always going to make sure we roster players we fully believe have at least 18 points in them in a good game. And not even just like, everyone can score 18 points in a career game, but it's just projectable, some sort of anticipation based, expectation here. So that's where we always come from with upside.
Yep, and that's a good table setter of like how we view things is largely through the lens of ceiling and how you get there. Let's begin things for today by talking about the key injuries impacting the Week 1 main slate, and luckily there aren't a ton across this one. Jamar Chase limited in practice on Wednesday as he continues to hold in, kind of looking for a new contract from the Bengals. Doesn't have the contract yet. He was kind of half practicing, half not at times this summer, pretty limited overall. We don't know what his role will look like, and frankly, we don't know for sure if he'll actually play. And also this Bengals versus Patriots game, one of the less appealing in the main slate, 40.5 point total. The Bengals favored by 8.5, so their implied total is fine, but like we're not going to get a shootout here most likely. So what's your interest level in the Bengals passing game as they take on New England here?
Relatively low. I would assume if Chase plays, he's got, his package of plays that, he's out there for. And, I don't think it's a situation where he plays 25% of the snaps. He probably plays like 60%.
Right.
Probably comes in high leverage situations, which could say, that could draw us right to, well, I guess we'll stick with Chase. His salary of 9,100. I don't see Cincinnati running Chase into the ground. Right. On such a short week and such a short, with the offseason being what it was. So he's out. We could say then, what about T. Higgins? His salary is 6,800 for week 1. Last year, we had a game without Chase, and T. Higgins did go for 140 yards on 8 targets. He had a 20% target share, 35% of the team's air yards. He had 5 downfield targets, so targets for me at least 10 yards downfield. Great usage. I think he is really the path that I would want to get to, if anything. But again, as you mentioned, the game environment here is not super optimal. There is also Andre Yosivas, who had 8 targets in that game as well, just 36 yards, but a catch rate over expectation of minus 15%, according to Next Gen Stats, 16 receiving yards under expectation as well. But he had 5 downfield targets. He scored at pretty much a historic rate last year on such minimal usage, which could speak to his talent.
Sure.
But in that game as well, Joe Mixon had 4 targets. Chase Brown had 2. Do you have any thoughts on Zach Moss this week? Because there are some pretty glowing reports around Zach Moss. His salary is 6,900, and I'll put this up front. There are some running backs I like. There's one in particular I love.
Yeah.
But outside of that, I'm kind of lukewarm on a lot of guys. Does he do anything for you?
He does one thing, and that is he crosses off Chase Brown for me. Because Chase Brown's salary is $5,400, and I kind of want to see what Chase Brown's his role will look like. He had a good role in the first preseason game, but Moss didn't play in that one. So I think they're going to split work, and that's enough where I'd rather hold off. I think if I want to go at this team, it could be via Yosivas. $4,300. Again, I have to ask myself, does he have that ceiling? And I think he would need Chase to be out to have that ceiling. And I also think you'd see a pretty heavy roster rate on Yosivas as well. And do I need to save that much salary? I might not. So honestly, I'm probably okay missing out on the Bengals because I don't think this game is going to torch me. So that's kind of where I'm at with this one is, do I need to go there when I don't know about Yosivas' ceiling and don't know what kind of role the running backs in this team will have?
Yeah, I would still say that we've been clamoring for that 6K range at receiver to be what it used to be. It at least is that for week 1, where there's a lot of, indecisiveness, what's Stephon Diggs' role, DJ Moore, etc. With that said, I think T. Higgins, with or without Chase, if Chase is playing, I still see T. Higgins leading the team in target share. He's a high leverage guy as well for 68. I wouldn't mind that as a one-off, but there's
Yeah.
also no way to bring it back for me. So that also kind of minimizes my interest. But it just, we're on the same page. It just sounds like I'm a little more open to T. Higgins than you might be.
Yeah. It just the game scares me off, but you're kind of saying the same thing there too. So
Yeah.
I understand that. Jalen Warren dealt with a hamstring injury in the preseason, but got in a limited session on Wednesday. He said he feels good, but not 100%. It is, though, Brandon, an Arthur Smith revenge game. Arthur Smith, the former head coach of the Falcons, now the OC for the Steelers. You know, that's kind of fun. Any interest in Najee Harris with Warren not 100% in this Artie Smith revenge game down in Atlanta?
Yeah, I mean, I promise I won't be talking about my season-long drafts like much, but Najee Harris was always a player I just kind of crossed off and thought he could be everyone else's problem of not doing much. But
You're also
he
drafting
kept
in Steelers country, which means that they probably will take him for you, which helps.
well, surprisingly, even drafting in Steelers country, I did get Najee at
Okay.
what was
Okay.
decent value in one league. It was a half PPR league, so uh, I'm more open to waiting and seeing what his workload is like
Yeah.
because they could also just rotate in, backs. They're gonna have a high run rate,
Yeah.
potentially. We're expecting that. But for week one, I don't know that going out of my way to play Najee. With that said, though, I kind of like the other side of this game
Yeah.
a decent amount, specifically Drake London.
Yes.
So I'm not out on on Najee entirely. I would be more receptive to playing him when I do get to London, which is I'll have way more Drake London than I will Najee. But where are you with Najee and any other interest in the Steelers?
Najee's salary is too low or too high for me at 67.
Yeah.
Like I think that's just like meatier than it should be. I'd rather get to the 7,000 range for a running back where you got Alvin Kamara, Devon Achane, Kenneth Walker is there. I like James Cook more than projection systems do. And then you also have James Conner in the low 6,000 range. So I probably won't have a single Najee share this week. If I'm running it back I'll also have London. If I'm running it back though, I'm going to do so George Pickens, salary $6,500, playing indoors. Russ Wilson can't do a whole lot right now, but he can chuck it deep still. And I think that fits well with George Pickens' game. So a London Pickens stack, pretty receptive to that, but I think that'll be my lone exposure to the Steelers in week one. So Artie Smith revenge game. I mean, the true revenge would be it would be ignoring his number one receiver, but alas.
Just because it's week one, Najee's max snap rate last year was 60% for a single game. Do you think that goes up or do you think that stays? Do you think it
I
goes
think,
down?
yeah. Cause Jalen Warren's good enough to keep a roll. And I think I think it seems like they want to use both them. So I'm fine with staying
Yeah,
away personally.
it kind of took a Bijan Robinson talent for them not to give the ball to 5 different running backs, and I don't think Najee's quite that. So
Bijan, George Pickens stacks also work. Fine with that as well. I do like
yeah,
Bijan this week. Finally, I don't know if anyone cares about this other than me, but DJ Chark didn't practice Wednesday with a hip issue. My guy, my favorite player of all time, DJ Chark, still sticking around. Good for him. Chargers, he's like my Chris Conley for you. The Chargers project to be super run heavy, but not a bad matchup with the Raiders. And Justin Herbert is healthy, not on the injury report at all on Wednesday. Any interest for you in the Chargers passing game with Chark potentially not playing in this one?
no. Historically, I would dig into every single game and take notes and figure out where the value is. Can I squeeze anything from it? I've gotten to the point in my process where games like this, I'm okay just crossing them off. I don't really see a way that this one burns me a ton. I guess I could be wrong there. But it is a little disappointing to just look at a Justin Herbert team and just say like, no thanks.
I think that they'll be efficient. I just don't think that there'll be enough volume right away for me to care. So I will be happy if he's efficient. I like watching Justin Herbert. I am a pro Jim Harbaugh person. But that efficiency can only do so much for you. So I'm okay with missing out for there. Okay, let's take a look at the bookmaker section for this week and dive into the 3 games we think are most intriguing from a stacking perspective on the FanDuel main slate. And the FanDuel main slate does include the Sunday night football game between the Rams and Lions. Didn't always get the Sunday night game on the main slate last year, or it looks like, at least based on week 1, we'll get that for this year. And it's the highest total on the slate. 51.5 with the Lions favored by 3.5. There's no Aaron Donald here. Neither quarterback is mobile, but both do benefit from the new scoring rules, a 3-point bonus for 300 plus passing yards. So that does help both Matthew Stafford and Jared Goff. And obviously, we actually don't have to guess where the ball is going when it comes to these 2 teams because a good amount of continuity on both sides. So what's your view of stacking this game? And is it your favorite game to stack on the slate?
Yeah, I mean, is there even a game that's close?
Yes.
Interesting.
In large part, well, I just like the Bills. So, and I like a lot of Cardinals. So Bills Cardinals is number 1 for me personally.
Okay. Yeah. All right. I still think Bills Cardinals is second, not the 1B for what I guess.
Yeah, it does have wind in it. And this one hopefully does not, or else something catastrophically has gone catastrophically wrong in Detroit. But yeah, I get that.
Yeah, so I'm gonna break down the new scoring bonuses whenever we hit some trends later on. But these are 2 quarterbacks who would be the sort of the poster boys for getting a bonus, thrown for over 300 yards. And there's such a correlation between when a quarterback does that and having pass catchers that go over 100 yards that this is going to be, look, we always stack quarterbacks and receivers. Other than like Lamar or Josh Allen sometimes, but that's going to be even more and more impactful. So I've been thinking about this. This would have been probably a 0 QB game, or maybe like a 1 QB game if we considered each of these guys a half before the bonus. 3 points is sure, like over the course of a season, it's going to raise someone's point per game average by a little bit. But when you're talking one single game and you can get 3 points from your quarterback, 3 points potentially from a wideout or tight end, more specifically a wideout, that stuff's going to matter a lot in a single game, a single week, whenever you're trying to either win it, even a head-to-head, that's going to matter. So I would kind of go so far as to say this is a 2 QB game.
Okay.
I really like Matthew Stafford. He's due for touchdown regression. He came on strong at the end of last season. He's got very obvious stack candidates, one of whom I think is under salaried in Cooper Kupp at 7,000. Puka Nacua is not 100%, but it sounds like he will be kind of playing without any restrictions. I'm a little bit lower on that. And then I've been a sucker for the Lions for a while now. I do think that even though I love this game, and this could really come back to get me, I might miss out on Jahmyr Gibbs because I don't know at 8,000 if he's going to get enough work because he's not 100%. I mean, I think he said he's 98%.
98 to 100. So
to 100? Okay.
Yeah, somewhere in there.
So, sure. Okay. Let's split the difference, call it 99%. They have a very viable second running back in David Montgomery, whose salary is 7,000. I just don't anticipate Gibbs, who already is kind of someone I have a little bit of workload concerns with.
Totally.
So I really do like this game. I like the Rams. I think there are some big question marks though, but the risk is worth it. Even for Gibbs, I think the risk could be worth it. Kyron Williams comes to mind, and then I got to leave it up to Jim to talk about the Lions wide receivers.
Oh yeah, the Lions number 1 wide receiver, Jameson Williams. Yes. Part of the reason why I'm drawn towards him is related to something I wanted to ask you about, because my hang up with the Lions is everybody has a high salary. Sam Laporta, $8,000. My jaw dropped when I saw that number. Yeah. That's way too high. Amon-Ra St. Brown, 89. I understand it, but I think I'd rather get to Tyreek Hill at 96. If I'm going to allocate that much at wide receiver, probably I mean, Puka is. You could talk to me about Amon-Ra and Puka, but for Cup for both those guys. And then Gibbs, I agree with your usage concerns at $8,000, given that Montgomery is a very good football player and they seem to like him for good reason. So Gibbs 8,000, Amon-Ra 89, Laporta 8,000. Most of my shares of those guys be FOMO shares, just because like they all had ceilings. Man, Laporta I'm not going to use, but like Gibbs and Amon-Ra is FOMO shares. Like I'm worried they can torch me because they do have ceilings. Honestly, though, I'm saying that, but I think it's actually just Amon-Ra who, like, at salary can burn me for not using him. Is that outrageous?
That of these names, only
Of the
Amon-Ra.
Lions 3 high salary guys, only Amon-Ra can absolutely like send me to Middle Earth for not using. I know Middle Earth is technically Earth, Brandon. Please don't educate me on Lord of the Rings stuff. I don't care. Send me to the Earth's core. I'll reward it.
I don't think Laporta scored a lot more than he should have last year for as few yards as he had. Kind of just a sort of historical outlier there. And tight ends, as we'll talk about, they don't get to 100 yards very frequently, as you can see there. He got close against the Niners in his last game, but I think he did it just once last year. I'm out on Laporta till that salary comes down.
Yeah.
Gibbs, I still think Gibbs can burn us. He can have 2 touchdowns. I don't know if he's going to have very many games where he actually gets a scoring bonus because he's going to have a lot of scrimmage yards, but maybe not 100 of one or the other.
I agree.
But Amon-Ra, he's also got a little bit more of that touchdown protection. If he gets 3 points because he goes over 100 yards but doesn't score, that matters. That turns out like that 14.5 point game toward the top of his game log into 17.5. That helps like smooth things out. And it, 9 targets, 110 yards, no touchdowns. That's a very Amon-Ra St. Brown line, although he scores a ton as well. So I'm with you where St. Brown is the one I have the most fear of. But that elevates me with Jared Goff and Matthew Stafford, just going back to the idea that these receivers can get over 100, specifically Kupp and Amon-Ra. And I think you could probably would you play Amon-Ra for 8,000 and Kupp for 79, or maybe like do 85 and 74? Because I think Kupp's undersalaried enough that you can go that route if you want.
For sure. And there's enough value on the slate for me to get to Amon-Ra, which is why I keep saying he's the one guy I will have FOMO shares of. And like I'll have stacks of Stafford with Kupp with Amon-Ra as a bring back and stuff like that. Like for game stacks definitely works. Jameson Williams, $5,800. Last year, his role improved as the season went along, but he's gotten a lot of hype throughout this offseason in Dan Campbell saying we can entrust him to run a more advanced route tree. They've been very high on him, and that has not always been the case. Like they've been willing to criticize him in the past, and they have not done that this year. Also, like, what else are they going to do? Like, Khalif Raymond is their third receiver, and they said they don't want to play on 65 snaps a game because it's Khalif Raymond. Like, Dan Campbell's been very transparent in this. So I'm going to take swings at Jameson Williams just because I think that there is a path to him having, a very high ADOT to go with an acceptable enough target total to get there. If I'm going to go with a low salaried receiver who doesn't get a lot of target volume, I need them to be downfield targets and I need them to be efficient downfield targets. And he actually does check both those boxes. High ADOT receiver at home, efficient spot. Like that's what we tend to want out of these guys. So I'm going to get there. I want to keep a lid on my roster rate because it's Jameson Williams still, but I'm going to be there. What about you?
Yeah, I'll get there. He's probably, he's game stacks only for me.
Sure.
But that also helps because it brings him like
a Stafford Kupp Williams stack means you can go bananas elsewhere. And that I think it's a viable stack.
For sure. And his, you said his role improved. Like he ran a lot more routes later in the season. He ran a lot of routes in the playoffs, but it didn't translate specifically to a better target share. Those target numbers still pretty low. So there's risk. He's one of the names that I think of when I say, okay, this team's talking him up. He's talented. I get it. How hard, like whenever I'm building lineups, I'm like, okay, Jameson Williams, plug him in, or do these fears come back? he's kind of one of the poster boys for that mentality for me this week. But because I'm stacking this game so much, I'll have him. Outside of that, I don't know if I'm going to get there. One name I do think we need to talk about in this game before we move on is Kyren Williams, though. What are your thoughts on Kyren?
So it sounds like they don't want him to play a 95% snap rate this year, which fair. He's like 5'2". I don't really want a 5'2" player on the field for 95% of the snaps. So, and that was kind of his like key value last year was that, but also like his salary did come down. So we're not like paying a salary commensurate with a guy who's doing that. So I probably will be pretty low on him just because the Lions had a pretty good rush defense last year and have added some guys in the middle who I think can make them even better at that this year. 8th against the run last year based on number fire schedule adjusted metrics. So I think there are guys I like more personally. Not 100% opposed, but not really there. What about you?
Kind of the same. He's game stacks only for me.
Okay. Any final thoughts for you on this game?
I think we covered it.
Okay, then let's talk about our second bookmaker game of this week. It's another indoor game that is between the Houston Texans and the Indianapolis Colts. Right now, FanDuel Sportsbook total is 48.5, and the Texans are favored by 2.5 in this game. I did take the under on this one earlier on. It was 49.5, now down to 48.5. I think that's a correct movement personally. I've still got it like reasonably high, but not quite as high in this game as the market is. But it's a very fun game because we get two quarterbacks who I think are very viable in CJ Stroud and Anthony Richardson. We've got a couple of running backs who can get some workload, receivers who are in play. How does this game rate out for you from a stacking perspective?
This one could rival. How close is this one for you compared to Bills Cardinals?
So it should be high because of the wind in the Bills game.
Yeah. But and I know you like the under, but that's not to say that if this game scores 47 points, that's fine for you. Yeah. Like for the under, but I think this one's more I think about it and the more concerns I potentially have with wind and just fully trusting the Cardinals, this game's kind of more appealing to me, or as appealing, and maybe I need to bump it up a little bit.
Yeah, and to that point, I do have it projected as being the fastest game on the slate, by a wide margin. The Colts are the main driver of that, but the Texans weren't slow last year either. They run a bit more than I like in early downs, but like they're still decently fast. So I think it helps from that perspective. And so like there are reasons to like this game. I just do worry a bit about it being a bit underwhelming in some regards. So I think it's like, honestly, I think I view all three of the games we're discussing, which is Bills, Cardinals, Texans, Colts, and Lions, Rams in the exact same tier. And I'm kind of hoping that we see roster rate gravitate towards one of those games or two of those games. Then I can focus on the third game and feel good about that. If that makes sense.
Yeah, that works.
Okay.
But yeah, this is a 2 QB game for sure. Anthony Richardson is kind of a fantasy football cheat code. He basically played 2 full games last season and had 10 carries in each of them. CJ Stroud, I don't know if he's still the favorite to lead the league in passing, but we're going to talk about 300-yard bonuses. He's got Stephon Diggs now in the mix with Tank Dell and Nico Collins. So honestly, the hardest part for me with this offense is going to be stacking them. There's going to be, there is definitely value in being out ahead of the curve. If you think, look, there's no way that Stephon Diggs is not leading this team in target share and he's going to get a 28% target share, and you're right in week 1, I get it. But Nico's phenomenal. Tank Dell, like even better. Like his usage last year was, for being small, he actually had a better downfield workload than Nico Collins last year. If you have a strong feeling there, or if you just say, you know what, I'm stacking Stroud and I'm going to stack him in any ways that I can and just hope that one of these guys goes off, there's a potential here to kind of have that week 1 sort of top stack by far. I just don't have a great feel for what this market share is going to look like between these receivers. What are
I
you
don't
thinking
either.
about the pass catchers?
I don't have a great feel either, but I feel good about the fact that Nico Collins will be on the field. Like Stephon Diggs, when he was with the Bills, didn't play every snap. Tank
Yeah.
Dell in the preseason didn't play every snap. He was more so out there for just 3 receiver sets. So Collins is the guy I feel best about being out there. And like he gets downfield work. He's playing indoors. I know that like he had his best games last year when Tank Dell was out, but I think he's also proven himself enough to still be a legitimate pass catcher. And again, his salary 71, which is not bad. So I prefer Collins. If I'm ranking them out, it's Collins 1. I'm going to go Dell 2, despite the fact he might not be out there every snap. I mean, he's just too fun to be $6,400. And then I'll go Diggs 3rd, and I might not get there with Diggs potentially. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm undecided there, but I like Collins a lot, and I like Dell enough to use him even outside of game stacks at times.
Yeah, I don't know if Dell's going to be getting any a lot of goal line snaps this year.
Gosh, ruined my dynasty teams.
Yeah, that also probably wasn't great for Tank Dell either, but
no. Let's focus on Jim here, though. Come
on. Do you think that the presence of Joe Mixon changes Tank Dell's rushing workload and kind of high leverage looks?
Sure.
Like, I mean, look, we like receivers who get high leverage carries. Do you think that after what happened last year, they're not giving?
Well, he was blocking on that play.
I know that.
Maybe.
But now that they could just hand it to Joe Mixon, do you think that just sort of changes the amount of
carries? He did get rushing work last year, right? About that. I kind of forgot that he got the rushing work too.
Yeah, it was awesome. Look at all his touchdowns.
Oh my gosh. Oh, that's insane. I think that Mixon, like, okay, this is gonna sound stupid. Can we trust tree this? Like, if you're listening and trust tree thought, I don't care about Joe Mixon that much. Like, I think their rushing game sucks. I think that they'll be better this year with the offensive line hopefully being healthier than what it was. It already is, because like they were already a disaster before week 1 last year. But like, I don't know, man. I just don't know if they're going to do a whole lot in the ground game. So like, yeah, maybe it'll decrease Tank Dell's rushing output, but I'm not really super high on Mixon. Maybe you can talk me into him. I should probably be higher. I don't know. Where are you on Mixon?
He's the type of name exactly in that 7,000 range. There's a lot of appealing names. If I like this as a game stack and I say, you know what, maybe Joe Mixon scores twice. CJ Stroud is just okay. He doesn't get all those passing touchdowns. Therefore, none of the receivers really hit. I could see that. He's mostly, I don't want to say game stacks because that's kind of contradictory, but when I'm playing Anthony Richardson instead of, I could see going that route. So yeah. I'm definitely higher on Joe Mixon than you are, but I'm also not sitting here saying like I think he's the play for them. Right. I'm with you. I'd rather have Nico Collins of the pass catchers if I can. CJ Stroud's going to probably lead the league in 300-yard games just because he's that guy. But this is a really fun game. So with that said, does anyone from Houston hit for you as I'm building one lineup, my best lineup? Does anyone make it, or is there just kind of too much going on for you to get to that point?
So I believe,
to me, I think Cooper Kupp is a better play than Nico Collins.
I think I sent you a lineup where it has Nico Collins in it.
Okay, so he's that close to you for being like the guy.
Yes.
Okay.
Like I think that Kupp is 1A in the low 7,000 range. Let's put Drake London there too at 67. I think London is 1. I would say it's either Collins or Kupp number 2 for me in that range. And I'll probably be in that range a lot. So like I might have all 3 in a 1 dart lineup. So yes, Collins a firm consideration for me. I have 1 lineup. He'll be in the consideration set at the very least. And I think Anthony Richardson might be too, honestly. I know he's not in Houston, but
yeah. So talk to me about the Colts then.
Yeah, I love Richardson for the reasons you discussed with the rushing. Salary's 83. I've done a lot of research on what leads to ceiling games from quarterbacks, and a lot of times you can see quarterbacks who are slight home underdogs outperform expectations and wind up in perfect lineups, and it makes sense. He is at home. He is indoors. And you also see underdog quarterbacks get a bit under rostered on FanDuel because they have lower implied totals and stuff like that. So I think Richardson is very good. I would also really like to get Jonathan Taylor. I'm currently leaning with putting him slightly above. I might be stupid. Taylor or Bijan?
Probably Taylor.
The more I think about it, the more I think I gotta go Bijan. I think that he's like, if we're talking about guys who could have not a McCaffrey workload, but like Diet McCaffrey, I think that Bijan's more so that guy than Taylor. I think Taylor's going to be insanely efficient as a rusher. I just, I do want the passing game usage still, despite the 100-yard bonuses. So I think they're very similar. I lean Bijan. So, but like Taylor is like in that discussion for me, despite the fact that I love Bijan, which I think is an endorsement of him. So high on Richardson, high on Taylor. I will use Michael Pittman at times and Anthony Richardson stacks, but if I have one lineup, I'm probably get Richardson by himself because I worry, like last year, those two were not synced up when Richardson played. Like the efficiency metrics from Richardson to Pittman were pretty horrid. So I think for me, it's really Richardson, JT, and then Pittman at times when I am using Richardson at quarterback.
Yeah, I should go Bijan.
Okay.
I just have Taylor. Like Taylor's the most likely to get 100 rushing yards, according to my sims and stuff. 100%. So that's kind of drawing me in, but I don't know if either of them are frankly a priority.
Yeah.
So that's probably where I am with it.
I might be a bit higher on them then. Where does CJ Stroud rate out for you in terms of quarterback for this slate? Because we like Richardson. We've established that. You like Stafford. Considering Goff, you said, where is Stroud compared to Richardson, Stafford? And I think he's above Goff, so I'm probably not going to ask him.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, cool.
He's anywhere between like QB2 and QB4. I don't think he's
so that's high enough to be in your player pool.
Oh, 100%.
Okay, cool.
The hardest
you're pretty firm about that he's going to be in your player pool?
Yeah, the hardest part is figuring out the right stack. And that doesn't mean that we should be scared off.
Sure.
Because he's probably going to have a lot of 300-yard games. I know we're hammering that. We haven't even done the trend on it just yet. But, like, 3 points is 75% of a passing touchdown. You get 300 yards, 3-4 touchdowns. Like, that's how, again, it's not just about a per-game projection or how many points per game did they add on. It's when you get that extra 3 and you hit the stack, you're getting 6 points. That's going to help separate. That's also going to help be a mistake eraser.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think I need to bump him up a bit because I've been higher with Richardson to this point, but like the 300-yard bonus does help pocket passers, and Stroud can run, but doesn't choose to because he's good enough where he doesn't have to. So I should probably bump him up a bit myself as well. Any final thoughts for you on this game?
I don't think so.
Okay, let's finish up then with the game that I talked about before. The Bills and the Cardinals. Right now, FanDuel Sportsbook total for this game is 47.5. Bills favored by 6.5. There has been some bad betting market movements against this game. If you want to stack it, total has gone down 2 points, and the Bills spread is lengthened by a point as well. We want tight spreads and high totals. This has moved against both those. That's probably because the wind is at 15 miles per hour. Even with the wind being 15 miles per hour, I still have a total of 49.6. So I'm probably going to take the over at some point if it continues to go down. And again, my model cares a lot about wind. So if it still thinks that the over is in play, I think that's intriguing to me. We've also got some guys with acceptable salaries on both sides of this game. So I like this game a lot. You've mentioned some hesitation with it. What's the biggest cause for pause for you?
Just that the Cardinals might get, I don't say blown out, but that they might not be super great. You're going to talk actually about rookies and how they perform in week 1.
Yep.
So, yeah, it's so easy to get excited about Marvin. It's really easy to get excited about Marvin Harrison Jr. The team is really, really vocal about how much they like James Conner. I get that. Even with all this, Trey McBride's my first tight end love. His workload's great. I just don't know if where's Kyler for you in terms of the quarterback pool?
So Josh Allen, even considering salary, is probably 1.
Yeah.
And then I probably put Stroud and Richardson both above him. both above Kyler.
Yeah.
I am somewhat inclined to put him above the Stafford and Goff game. Although I would say I might put Tua above all of them. And again, we didn't put in the I didn't put in the section because I filled it out. But I think the Tua might be above Stafford and Goff for me. So Kyler is like fringe a guy I will get to.
Yeah. So like I'm with you. I don't
Yeah.
feel like I'm gonna hammer Kyler, and I also want to be cautious that I don't just get too enamored with the potential of 3 extra points and say someone like Stafford is different than, he's on the same tier or above Kyler Murray, for example, because Kyler we know can run. But if I really am curious to see if the pocket passers get elevated in terms of their salaries as the season progresses. But if we're gonna get like low to mid 7,000 quarterbacks in games that should allow them to throw a lot and throw very efficiently, I think that that's going to be appealing. And Kyler, his efficiency wise, I guess for me, it's just that I don't put him on the same tier as I used to, as a lot of people used to talk about Anthony Richardson. I'd rather go with Richardson than Kyler pretty often.
Sure.
Because we know Kyler's historically a very average at best passer in terms of his efficiency. Hopefully that changes with having a generational talent at wide receiver now. But, who, I don't know. I think Marv's going to get a little too popular this week.
Yep.
And I'm probably out.
Yeah. Marvin Harrison Jr., $6,600. Keon Coleman, $6,000 the same game. Another salary that kind of like blew my mind when I saw it. Like I assumed he'd be low 5,000s, and to see he's at 6, I know it doesn't sound like a big difference, but it really truly like I put in my player picks before I looked at the salary and then took him out because I was like, that's way higher than it should be. So, and like, he played every snap with the first team offense in the preseason. According to Nate Yonke of Pro Football Focus, I think it was 35 of 35 snaps to the first team offense, which is awesome. And he's going to be playing alongside Mac Hollins a lot, who is more of a blocker, not a proven target earner. So that could funnel work there, but like, I don't know, man. Like, it's tough. Like, and be like, okay, we'll go to Khalil Shakir instead, but he might split work with Curtis Samuel and might not play in non-3 receiver sets either. So honestly, the receivers for Buffalo are not as appealing as I thought they'd be, which maybe kind of goes to your point about like I should be lower on this game. But I also could just say, hey, dummy, use Dalton Kincaid and don't worry about it. Or hey, dummy, use James Cook, that kind of thing. So
high salary though.
Yeah, 68's high for Dalton Kincaid, but I can get there for sure. So where are you on the Buffalo scale, guys? And I'll include James Cook in that discussion too.
Love James Cook. He's got red zone issues.
Sure.
But even with that, red zone scoring is tied to expected touchdowns. I understand that, but it's a little bit overblown because you can get a lot of the picture with overall production and efficiency. He's going to lose out touchdowns. I get that. The salary to me is reasonable in a game against. So PFF released their preseason, forecasting, ranking every team's, unit. Where do you think the Cardinals rank?
Dead last across the board.
Okay.
Is that accurate?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I don't want to overthink it with James Cook, whose role we know should be there. And yes, he's got touchdown concerns, but he also is going to catch passes. And while that's not going to get you a bonus if you're just getting, 70 rushing yards and 40 receiving yards, I get it. But I love James Cook. I just feel like there's so many ways to get the pass catchers wrong.
Yeah.
And I think I'm just a little bit lower on Kincaid. I don't anticipate getting up to like 6,800 for a tight end. I know it's a $400 difference, and I love Trey McBride, but I start to really kind of question things above 6,500 at tight end, and I'm not quite there with Kincaid. So that for those reasons,
sure.
For saying, look, I like James Conner, I love Trey McBride, I'm okay with Kyler. All 3 receivers for the Bills, I'm kind of wishy-washy on. So that's why I just have this game a little bit lower than you do, I think, in terms of stackability.
If I give you one Josh Allen lineup, are you going with him by himself, Kincaid, James Cook? What do you do with that one?
I'd go probably Shakir.
Okay, fair enough. $50,
the receiving props for him are best.
Yeah,
and I trust that a lot.
And he did earn a lot of targets when he was on the field last year. So I think there's value. And that was while competing with Stephon Diggs. And Stephon Diggs ain't in town anymore. So I think that's valuable for him too.
Yeah.
I think that's fair. Of the receivers, I do like Shakir most, but I probably prefer Kincaid of the pass catchers if I make it more broad. On the Cardinals side of things, I really, really like James Conner. $6,100 for him. And Connor is a guy who I was like stubborn with last year. I was like, I'm not using this 68-year-old running back who is on a bad offense. I refuse to do that. But he is a guy who earned some targets last year. They brought in Trey Benson to be, like a complimentary kind of guy. Benson was not operating on late downs in the preseason. I'm not really sure what they will have there instead. So, like, he might be a 75% snap rate kind of guy at $6,100 facing a Bills team that lost linebacker Matt Milano. I kind of think a lot of things add up to make James Conner really appealing. And he helps offset the salary of Josh Allen as a bring back for a game stack. So I really like James Conner. Talk me out of it.
I'm not going to, because even though it's we can pick and choose who we roster in DFS. I don't know how often I'm going to get to Bijan and Jonathan Taylor. The 7,000 range is appealing, but if you can get a great workload at this type of salary, I'm not going to talk you out of it, especially in a game that could be competitive, could be high scoring. I think everything's factored in for 6,100. So I'm not going to be able to talk you out of him.
Mm-hmm.
I still keep going back and forth on James Conner and Jerome Ford.
Mm-hmm.
I probably should lean Conner, but I do think Ford's interesting as well. But yeah, Conner, if memory serves, I was a little bit higher on him than you were last
you
year.
Very much were.
Yeah. And that's not, but I get it. And hopefully this team is just relatively efficient this season in terms of moving the ball. And when you got great playmakers at tight end and at least one at receiver, I think that's going to help. So
that one being Greg Dortch, right?
Yes.
Greg Dortch's salary is $4,600. I will have a non-zero number of Greg Dortch teams just as a fun thing. McBride, you alluded to 64. Is he like a consideration as a tight end one for you on this slate?
He is the tight end one for me on the slate.
Okay. Talk me through that.
Well, he's going to be a player pick for me, so I just kind of buzzed through those notes. But we know his workload is pretty phenomenal, and he's due for touchdown regression. Scored twice last year. Should have scored about 5 to 5.5 times according to my data. They've got some help on the outside to take pressure away from McBride, and honestly, I'm okay with saving salary at receiver and running back here and there. I don't really see a path to doing it at tight end with any confidence. And there are enough tight ends who can kind of burn us with that like 18-point game, including McBride. So I think they're going to have to throw the ball. I do think that they're going to trail. You don't just want passing volume with no efficiency. That's not how you, especially at tight end when you kind of almost always need a touchdown. So for me, McBride is the guy without a lot of question. So I'm going to want to get to him pretty frequently, which is why I think my most common stack here is going to be Josh Allen, McBride. And then I don't know how often I might just play Josh Allen by himself.
I think that's fair. And I think that's on the table for sure. Any final thoughts for you on this game?
No.
Okay, well, let's dive in now to our trends discussion. Just 2 trends for this week because one of them is going to be a doozy. In case you did not see, FanDuel has updated their scoring rules for 2024 to now include bonuses. It's 3 points for 300 yards passing or 100 yards rushing or receiving. That changes things a lot. So, Brandon, you dug into the data and outlined key takeaways. What should we know about the new scoring rules on FanDuel for 2024?
Yeah, so I'm going to be throwing out a lot of numbers. I'm going to try to keep it as succinctly as possible. But I do have a write-up in detail on FanDuel Research. Article is titled, What You Should Know About FanDuel's Updated Scoring for 2024, if you want to search for that.
I did tweet it out this morning if you want to just go to x.com. X.com sounds weird. Go to Twitter, and it's on my Twitter if you want to look there.
Okay. Yeah, I did not
Sorry,
tweet
yeah. Let's up the search clicks. Search for Brandon's thing on Google instead.
So I'm going to isolate some of the findings that I found. For the most part, all of these go back to 2016. And whenever you look at like how frequently a position hits a certain threshold, you have to kind of include some cutoffs. You don't want to include every game where a running back had a snap, because like that's going to skew things. So I wanted to keep things more in like the usability bucket and say, how do we like look at things in a relevant sense? So I'm going to start with quarterbacks and just kind of go on. But I think that quarterbacks are the most impacted position by this change. So quarterbacks since 2016 with a 90% in-game snap rate have gone over 300 passing yards about 24% of the time. It's kind of larger than most of the other thresholds. So this is the sort of most attainable number that we get. And rushing yards, they get over 100 very infrequently, under 100, under 1%, aside from Lamar, who's just a phenom. He's like at 20% himself. But, now if you look at the breakdown of scoring since 2016, like what percentage of points came from what, it's 57% of FanDuel points coming from passing yards. And that's going to, give more value to those pocket passers. If you retroactively applied the scoring bonuses to last season, the biggest changes in points per game were Kirk Cousins, Derek Carr, CJ Stroud, Matthew Stafford, unsurprisingly. Now, of course, they can only go up. If someone did this every game, they'd go up 3 points. They're not going to do that every game. So it's a small per game change, but we're talking about one singular outcome, one output in terms of FanDuel points. An extra 3 points does matter, whether it's just a head-to-head or especially for tournaments. So pocket passers get a big boost, and I'll kind of leave it at that. For running backs, I'm going to foreground running backs almost never get 100 receiving yards, so just kind of ignore that unless it's Christian McCaffrey for the most part, but even that number is still pretty low. So if you look at in-game snap rate cutoffs of 50%, 60%, and 70% for running backs, here's the frequency at which those buckets go over 100 rushing yards: 17%, 21%, and 26%. So 70% of the snaps and above, they get there, about a quarter of the time. How many running backs nowadays are actually playing 70% of the snaps consistently? Not a lot. That's why these guys who do it are going to have a lot of value. Now you can look at snaps, but of course you need rushing volume to get over 100 rushing yards in a particular game. I have a table, some other stuff in the article. Again, I recommend checking that out. But basically, your frequency of getting above 100 rushing yards really spikes at around 19 carries. It's 13% of 18 carry games get to 100 yards and 23% at 19. And then it kind of really jumps up from there once you hit 20. So basically, to simplify it, 20 carries at running back to get to 100 yards is kind of what you typically need. And carries, to get 20 carries, you got to play a lot of snaps. It's not these guys who are 2-down rushers, early down guys, goal line guys getting over 100. That's not what those players aren't going to benefit. It's the featured backs who are going to benefit. That's the big takeaway for me with running backs. Moving into receivers, 100-yard games are actually a little more infrequent than I kind of thought, even for guys with bigger snap rate workloads. And again, I know receivers and snap rates not perfect. So again, I have snap rate data in the article, but I also have target data in the article. And you really see that 100-yard frequency jump at, from 9 to 10 targets. 16% of the games with 9 targets were 100 yards, 26% at 10, and then it's 44% at 12 targets. So again, volume is going to matter. You need high volume receivers to get 100 yards. Very unlikely that players do it with 7 to 9 targets. That percentage is 12.5%, for example. And from 4 to 6 targets, it's like 3%. So it only takes one, doesn't apply, especially for a 100-yard bonus. Tight ends we can keep really quick because almost nobody gets to 100 yards unless you're Travis Kelce. Last season, 11 different tight ends had a 100-yard game. 4 of them did it more than once in the regular season. George Kittle did it 3 times. Kelce did it twice. Same for Trey McBride and David Njoku. It's not super bankable. Keep that in mind. Just about 7% of relevant tight end games had 100 yards, and it's really just the superstars or a complete career game. Don't think it's worth changing things. I think the most impactful takeaway from this, though, is stacking, because it stands to reason that when a quarterback throws for 300 plus yards, his pass catchers likely are benefiting from that. And the frequency with which those things are correlated or happen together, I think is really relevant. So if you just look at like relevant quarterback games, there's about a 32% chance that they have a 100-yard pass catcher. Whenever that quarterback fails to throw for 300 yards, that number jumps down about 10 percentage points to 22%. Some of those for 250, there's still about a 22% chance that a specific receiver goes over 100. But if you say you lock in the fact that a quarterback went over 300 yards, it's over 70% of the time that he had at least one 100-yard receiver. So if you lock in, say, CJ Stroud for 300 yards this week, 7 times out of 10, he's going to have at least one of his pass catchers go above 100. That's an extra 6 FanDuel points if you have both of those. That's going to really separate you in tournaments, and it's also going to help erase those mistakes in smaller contests. You still need to stack. Stacking is even, to me, more important than it was in the past. And about 14% of 300-yard passers had multiple 100-yard pass catchers, so it's not the worst, but probably going to be a little bit sensitive to double stacking when I was a little bit more open to it in certain situations in the past. There's a negative correlation with 300-yard passers, 100-yard rushers. It's like I wouldn't worry about it too much, but I do think that, Jim's beloved quarterback running back stack gets dinged a little bit. So
Tragic.
Again, I have more data. This data is, it's going to kind of go past you probably, but if I had to make like a TLDR here, pocket passers are getting a bump up. You still want to target about 20 carries for running backs and 10 targets for receivers, and that stacks are going to matter even more this season than in the past. So that's my takeaway from filtering through all of this. What jumps out to you?
Yeah, I think the pocket passer thing is the biggest takeaway. And we saw that last year where pocket passers were relevant for DFS. And despite the fact I really wanted to ignore them, like Tua Tagovailoa was in the perfect lineup at quarterback twice in the first 6 weeks and could have been in week 3 as well. But Justin Herbert edged him out there. And like that was at salaries of $8,300 and 77. He's at 77 again for this week. So like, I don't want to make it about him specifically, but like, I need to change my mindset and be more receptive to pocket passers than I was in the past, because their ability to get you a 30-point game is now a lot higher than it used to be. Like Tua specifically would have gotten you 30 points, 30 FanDuel points in weeks 1 and 3 last year as a result of this 3-point bonus. Scored 28 in both those. So I think that's a pretty impactful change. And the stacking thing we already did anyway, so that's not going to change. Other thing is, I have always cared about yards from scrimmage at running back. I need to shift that a bit towards being more receptive to, I mean, he's not healthy, but like a Nick Chubb kind of guy who's going to get 100 rushing yards, because now his ability to get you 25 FanDuel points is a lot. The path there is a lot clearer than it was before. Kenneth Walker is pretty similar. Jonathan Taylor is pretty similar. So I still want guys who get work in the passing game, and I'm still going to prioritize them, but it does make those rush only backs more attractive. So it's kind of like viewing pocket passing quarterbacks and rush only running backs, being more receptive to them than I was in the past, while not actively ignoring my ceiling concerns around them. So slight tweaks, but impactful tweaks for my process for sure.
Yeah. So I don't think we need to reinvent the wheel here. We don't need to go and say which running backs can get 100 yards, because those are the backs we're already trying to target.
Sure.
The receivers, maybe if anything, it's guys like Amon-Ra and
Sure.
just the high volume pass catchers. Just okay, 115 yards, 8 catches, but no touchdowns. It's fine. Getting an extra 3 points, it's half of a touchdown. That can really fend things off and smooth things out a little bit. So yeah, don't change everything. but we needed to dig into it because that's what we do in the trend section.
Yeah, there were only like a couple instances where receivers made perfect lines without 100 yards receiving, or without a touchdown, I should say, in the past, and they were like all Robert Woods, basically. But Puka did it last year. Keenan Allen did it last year once too. I think that'll happen more often now. And then Puka did it again, actually. So he was the new Robert Woods on the exact same team. So I think that'll happen more often now, where guys can get there without scoring a touchdown. Okay. Let's talk about my one trend for this week, which is how rookies perform in week one, because you could consider Caleb Williams, you could consider Jaden Daniels, Marvin Harrison Jr., Keon Coleman, Malik Neighbors. There are a lot of rookies who are at least somewhat in play for this week. So I want to dig in and kind of see how rookies do in week one versus how they do in other weeks. Starting a quarterback, since 2019, no rookie quarterback has topped 22.6 FanDuel points. I'd ideally like my quarterback to have 25 to 30 points as their ceiling. They have not done that in this sample. On the whole, quarterbacks have hit 25 FanDuel points 17.5% of the time in week one. It's actually higher than how often they hit it in the weeks 2 through 18 at 15.5%. So Jaden Daniels, very fun. Caleb Williams, very fun. And you can still consider them, because this is just a 5-year sample and it's not a lot of quarterbacks in that sample, but be skeptical for sure. In that same span, 37 running backs have gone for 20 plus FanDuel points in week one. Only one of those 37 was a rookie. So that's 2.7% versus rookies were 12.1% of that sample from week 2 on. So rookie running backs not getting to 20 points very often in week one relative to what they do later in the year. Similarly, only 3 rookie receivers have gotten 18 plus FanDuel points in week one in that span. That is 4.8% of all receivers to hit that threshold. Rookies were 12% to score 18 plus points from week 2 on. Tight end was a bit better, but even there it was underwhelming. Only one rookie tight end has scored 12 plus FanDuel points in week one from 2019 through 2023. That was 4.3% of all tight ends to hit that threshold. Rookies are at 7.5% of all tight ends to hit 12 plus FanDuel points from week 2 on. So not as big of a discrepancy there, but still some discrepancy for sure. So rookies in general underperform veterans in week one, or I mean in general, I guess, but also specifically in week one. And it's especially true when we look at ceiling, which is our focus for DFS. You don't see a lot of huge games out of rookies. I know Kareem Hunt did back against the Patriots. That was outside of the sample. Alan Hearns had a massive game back in the past too. Like, we've seen these performances, but those are the outliers. Those are the exceptions, not really the norm. So I'm not crossing rookies off, but I want to be extra skeptical of them this week. So what's your interest level in Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, Marvin Harrison, Malik Neighbors, Keon Coleman, and all those guys, knowing that rookies do sometimes take a bit to ramp up?
Yeah, this was interesting, but it also makes sense for a lot of different reasons. Whether it's player level nerves, teams not wanting to overexpose their rookies in week one. Nothing really blends these two trends together quite like Matthew Stafford versus Jaden Daniels.
Sure.
In the past, and I still have interest in Jaden Daniels because I think he's pretty phenomenal. And I think that he could do a lot of things that have his salary up in the 8,400 range quickly. But also Caleb Williams, who's got a lot of viable pass catchers. And they're facing defenses that aren't really anything we need to worry about.
Yeah.
But now it's like, okay, Stafford, you can't, there's no locks, anything like that. That's not what this is, but he's probably going to be efficient. He's probably going to throw for over 300. He's probably going to have, he's got clear stack candidates, whereas there's more uncertainty here. And uncertainty can be great.
Yes.
If Jaden Daniels goes out and just shows that he's like the new fantasy football cheat code, I'll be a dummy for not being there. So with that said, like, he's still in the mix for me.
Yeah.
But with knowing what you just pointed out with the bonuses, I don't know necessarily being attainable for the rookies, in week one, I think it does change things. So I still don't mind either of those two quarterbacks, but I don't see myself getting there just because I'm not going to play 10 quarterbacks. I got to narrow it down. I typically only get to like 3 or 4. I don't know if either of them are going to make the cut this week. But I think maybe even the more interesting question is, the two specific receivers in somewhat questionable situations with Marv. He's got wind potentially, tough defense, but could be high scoring. Salaries kind of already up there, and then Neighbors. Do either of them do enough for you that you would want to go out of your way to get exposure to them?
So Neighbors' salary is $6,300, and that's low for a guy who like could conceivably get a 30% target share.
Yeah.
But it's also a 30% target share from, I don't know why I clicked the game log. 30% target share from Daniel Jones. I don't know that they'll get a 30% target share. So it's like I should be there with him and with Harrison, but I also like, I don't really have to like get that much higher to get a guy who I know has a good role in Drake London, who is playing indoors at $6,700. George Pickens, $6,500, Tank Dell, $64, and I can feel better about their roles. They're not going to have that acclimation period that those guys might have. So, like you said, not crossing those guys off, but like I'm okay being a bit lower on them and it impacting the way I view them for this week.
I think this also goes back to what I said at the top of the show is like kind of expectations. Like we can get excited. We can believe that Neighbors is like the next big thing. When it comes to, okay, Drake London, I know the salaries aren't exact, but I'm going Drake London 10 times out of 10 here, honestly, or at least 9 times out of 10, but
100%.
So like you gotta, it's fun to talk about stuff. It's fun to think about things, but whenever it comes down to clicking these names into your lineups, into your player pools, there's a lot of risk that goes into it with the and I just think I'd probably rather go with Stafford over Jaden Daniels, although that's closer. Or are you higher on Daniels than Williams? Because I think I would be due to the rushing. Yeah. So, although Williams could end up being someone who gets a lot of those bonuses. So, anyway, I'm probably fine to miss out on the rookies and kind of wait and see.
I would like to buy in week 2. I'll let them hopefully underperform week 1, buy in later on this year because we do see things tick up. Like Justin Jefferson didn't start week 1 for the Vikings. He did start by like week 3 or whatever it was. Like, and he was phenomenal as a rookie. So I want to buy in later on, basically, is my takeaway here. Weather for this week, we do have 3 spots where the winds are elevated. The first one is one we've discussed. That's Bills, Cardinals in Buffalo. 15-mile-per-hour winds there. It is the Cardinals going outdoors. They typically play indoors. That's a downgrade for them. Bills play in elevated wind all the time, and it doesn't impact them a whole lot. So lesser downgrade for Buffalo, slightly bigger downgrade for Kyler. So that does push things in something we discussed before, where probably bumping up Anthony Richardson above him, Stroud, and honestly, the more I think about it, Tua. 14-mile-per-hour winds in Cleveland for the Browns and Cowboys, a game we have not discussed, and a game that, for my purposes, doesn't exist. It's also 10-mile-per-hour winds in Miami for the Jags and Dolphins. So Tua does have wind too, but that's pretty typical of Miami this time of year. Let's go now, position by position, Brandon, break down our top plays for the week 1 FanDuel DFS main slate. At quarterback, who are you targeting for this week?
I'm going Josh Allen. I'm not going to worry about the win too much. The salary is high, but it's week 1, so we've got some value, some under-salaried players. Specifically, I think at receiver, the 7,000 range at running back is nice, and there's no Christian McCaffrey, so don't have to kind of play that game. But Josh Allen, to me, and I think to a lot of people, there's a big 4 in fantasy football at quarterback. Allen's the only one of those 4 on the main slate, and I think that's relevant. Facing the Cardinals, who are 32nd in D-line ranking, linebacker ranking, and secondary ranking according to PFF. Love to see that. Honestly, the hardest part here is getting the stack right. I know it sounds like I'm completely out on Kincaid. I'm not out on Dalton Kincaid. I just don't know how often I'm going to get to Kincaid. If I'm stacking a receiver with him, it's most often going to be Khalil Shakir, but he should be about 32% likely to go over 300 passing yards based on his baseline projection from Numberfire. So I don't know how you don't have Josh Allen as your QB1. It's almost a little bit like a Scotty Scheffler in week 1, where it's like, give me a case for not playing him, and I don't really see it, especially because you can get there.
Yeah.
So I am there with Josh Allen. I struggled really hard for this QB2. I like Stroud a lot. I might end up playing more CJ Stroud than Matthew Stafford. I might be bumping up, certain other names. You make a good point with Tua. He was also kind of in this mix, but Matthew Stafford indoors, of course, the revenge game narrative. But he's got very obvious stack candidates with Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp. I love Cooper Kupp this week at a salary of just 7,000. Lions defense probably a bit improved, but two things in Stafford's favor. He's about 32% likely to go for 300 yards. Love to see that. And he's also one of the biggest touchdown regression candidates in football. His touchdown rate spiked a lot. It started off really poor and then it got better and better, but he's still due for regression there. You see all that yardage that he can rack up. In this matchup, I just think that there are, of course, paths to Stafford having a bad game, but I think that, and we don't talk about floor, we don't talk about safety. I think there's actually like a ceiling for Stafford now.
Yeah.
You give him that game he had last year, that's 25.68 FanDuel points now against the Lions. Give him an extra touchdown. Like, we're really like 350 and 3 is probably going to be like the new baseline for massive games for these pocket passers. And I think that's within his reach this week.
It used to be 330 and 4. I think 330 and 3 is a fair ask. I think that does actually lower the threshold. So
I don't recall us saying 330 a lot, but
oh no, sorry, I was not saying something we discussed. It was based on research.
All right, I got you.
Lineups. Yeah. So you got Allen and Stafford. Allen is the one guy I've felt pretty firm about having here, in large part because of what you discussed. Where we can get there, we can get to his salary for this week, and I'd very much like to, because it is a very attractive game. He is facing a dog-eat-do defense, and they didn't really do a lot to address it this offseason either. They've kind of been like, okay, we're going to figure out the offense and we'll worry about the rest later. Like, if I look at my total projections for the entire year, every Cardinals game looks like a shootout. And like, if we could start it off with Josh Allen, let's do it. It's a great game. Massive implied total for the Bills. Wind is the one concern, but the Bills don't tend to let up when they're up big. And I think that's a big thing for Allen at $9,200. My second love, I had Anthony Richardson. The more I think about it, I'm going to go Tua. I think that the bonus stuff does matter quite a bit for him, given we know where the ball is going. You talked about the increased value of stacks, and we know that he's going to chuck it quite a bit. Tua last year, again, had 300 plus passing yards 5 total times, and almost all this occurred before the weather got cold. It ain't going to be cold in Miami on Sunday. So it's a game with a very high total, does have slight wind concerns at 10 miles per hour, but we know where the ball is going. I think the Jags will keep things close. I kind of like the Jags overall this year, and I have faith in the Dolphins adjusting the adjustments that were made to them last year. So I think 2 at 77 is someone I've really talked myself into as the show has gone along. So I'm going to go with Josh Allen and Tua Tagovailoa as my two loves at quarterback. Moving over to running back, who are you targeting there?
I love one. My second love on the list is actually my favorite running back play, but I'll start off here with James Cook at 7,600 in a game that, again, you like more than I do, but I still like a lot. James Cook is, he's got a good workload. He's the guy in the backfield until it's sort of proven otherwise. I know that he can lose out on goal line touches, but at 7,600 in a tier that's kind of really interesting, honestly, James Cook does a little bit to stand out to me. 92 scrimmage yards per game last season. His scrimmage yard prop on FanDuel Sportsbook's 86.5. Again, I know you need red zone touches to increase your scoring rate, but it's not like he never was on the field in the red zone. So I still fully believe that the math will win out to a degree and he'll score more frequently. Couldn't ask for a better matchup, again, according to like those preseason PFF grade units where Arizona's last in everything. And he's tied to a slate high implied team total. So I don't think I'm going to have Josh Allen and James Cook paired together, at least due to the fear of missing out on the bonus potential or reducing the probability of it. So if I'm not playing Josh Allen in lineups, James Cook's going to get a bump for me. So my second love, which again is probably he's my RB1 for the week, right at 7,100, is Alvin Kamara. Kamara's workload last year was way better than I think people realize. If you look at adjusted opportunities, which is what Jim coined for carries plus double your targets for running backs to help account for just the inherent value of a target for running backs, he was at 27.2 last year per game. Christian McCaffrey was at 27.4. So it's a 0.2 difference, and nobody else was above 26.5. I know he's got some offensive issues, efficiency concerns with, not the best offensive line in football, but he projects well in terms of targets and carries. Carolina is not a particularly worrisome rush defense, entering 2024. He's another guy who underperformed in the touchdown column in 2023. So I'm really, really going to be tuned in to how well New Orleans plays, because I'm going to love Kamara often. I love Chris Olave probably more than most. So I'm really tuned in here, but I think Kamara at this salary is my RB1 for sure. And I know you love him too, so we'll talk more about him in just a second. My third love, I said this at the top. There's one running back I love. I'm okay with others. I probably need to warm up on Travis Etienne. I probably need to bump up Joe Mixon a smidge. I know a lot of people like Kenneth Walker, but I'm never quite as high on Kenneth Walker as others. You make a great case for James Conner, but I still think we should take a look at Jerome Ford at a salary of just 6,200. Oh, I should also probably shout out David Montgomery, honestly. But Jerome Ford, workload projections are great. According to Numberfire, he wasn't efficient last year in games without Nick Chubb, but his role was kind of capped with Kareem Hunt around. He just projects well in a game that, the implied totals here don't look great. I wouldn't be surprised if this is a little bit higher scoring than that. I could be off base in that. Maybe your model has this total really low. But Jerome Ford, in terms of workload, it's really low.
It's very low.
How low?
How low can it go? Actually, don't ask that. It was like 31, I think, for a Jets game last year. I have this at 39.99.
99. But I don't know. I think that the workload here, the potential for improved efficiency for Ford. Again, I feel worst about this love. I probably should go Connor. If I'm plugging things in, I might go Connor over Ford pretty frequently. But the more I think about this, the more I want to consider and mess around with three lineups with lineups with three running backs in the 7K range.
Yeah, I think that's very fair. It's a good range for sure. And there are some guys we didn't talk a lot about who are in there too. So your loves are James Cook, Alvin Kamara, and Jerome Ford. I originally had James Cook and Alvin Kamara as mine too. I'm going to keep Kamara because I agree with you. And we'll talk about him in a second. But I actually want to talk a bit more about Bijan Robinson as being a guy, just because I've built Josh Allen lineups and I can get to Bijan or JT. And I kind of think I want to do so because, again, Robinson is a guy that I don't want to say Rams coaching staff. They were the Rams, part of the Rams coaching staff. The Falcons coaching staff has raged about this entire offseason. And we saw the talent last year. He was a guy who got a ton of yards in scrimmage because he would get work both as a rusher and as a receiver. You mentioned how backs never get to 100 receiving yards. He kind of did in the final game for them last year. 103 there. Wasn't close to that in other times. But if you look at Numberfire's projections, they have Robinson projected for 110 yards from scrimmage. Nobody else is above 96. And a good chunk of that does come on the ground. So he could get the 100-yard bonus in one of those two spots, probably the rushing. I just think that he's the one guy who has a chance to get a Breece Hall, Christian McCaffrey workload, and he's the only guy in the slate in that tier. So I should probably get to him at $8,800.
Did you say you have Josh Allen Bijan lineups that you like?
Yes, I did. You want me to build it right now?
You might be pretty. I probably have a good idea of how it's going, but
you probably do. I don't remember who I used at tight end. I think I used Evan Ingram, and I used the Falcons at defense. I used Jackson Smith and Jigba, and then I had $1,600 for two receivers, which means I probably shouldn't have London in there since I have Bijan in the Falcons defense, but I can make it work real easily. There we go. Build that out on the fly. Josh Allen plus Bijan. I don't hate any player in that lineup.
Okay. Yeah. James Conner and Jackson Smith and Jigba, two guys that you yelled at me for last year. So I'm excited
Hey,
to
it's a
hear you
different
talk
year,
about
baby.
them. I
Different
know.
coaching staff for
Yeah, yeah.
JSN.
And Evan Engram. I might have heard more about Evan Engram than anyone else ever.
It's a new year, baby. It's a new year. New year, new me. No more Calvin Ridley there. It's a new year, new Jim. We're good to go.
I do agree with you where Bijan should be elevated. I probably should have just punted on Ford and said Bijan, especially if I'm open to, because Bijan in non Josh Allen lineups, very, very doable.
Yeah.
So I should go out of my way to prioritize that. That's a great call.
Okay. And then my second love is you alluded to Alvin Kamara. The Panthers ranked 31st against the rush last year. They have added a lot of pieces on defense, but it seemed like those were kind of making up for the loss of Brian Burns. They traded to the Giants. So I don't think they're going to be a lot better. It's just more so different dudes. And as you alluded to, the workload for Kamara was unreal last year. 28.3 adjusted opportunities per game. That's an amazing workload for $7,100. Could get vultured by Taysom. That's fine. I'm okay with that. I think that he is very well worth it in DFS. My third love and my favorite value play of this week at any position is going to be the guy we talked about before in James Conner, $6,100 on FanDuel for this week. And they're big underdogs, means that they could get blown out here. The Bills are a Super Bowl contender, but Connor got plenty of work in the passing game last year. He was efficient on the ground, and I think that efficiency should carry over given that he's got Kyler Murray. The coaching staff, honestly, was pretty fun last year for Arizona too, so some faith in them. And now facing a Bills team that will not have Matt Milano at linebacker, that hurts their rush defense. So I think that even though we have concerns around the Cardinals in general, concerns around this game, I just think this role is too good for $6,100. And I can't avoid a guy who could get 3 down work and goal line work, regardless of situation, if his salary is this low. He has the lowest salary of a guy who could realistically play a 75% snap rate. So I want James Conner in a lot of my lineups for this weekend as a result of that workload. So
yeah.
Go ahead.
Put me on the board for Conner over Ford.
Okay. I can take that. Makes me feel better about being obsessed with him, even though he was your guy last year. Okay, so Connor, Kamara, and Bijan, my 3 loves at running back. Receiver, what you turn into there?
We got a lot more overlap yet again at receiver. I guess it's a good thing, but also kind of I don't know. But I'm going to start off with Cooper Kupp at 7,000 indoors in the game of the week. Puka Nacua is not 100%, but it's, I don't anticipate that he'll be limited or anything like that. But last year, Kupp had 12 games with at least 50% of the snaps alongside Puka Nacua. And in those, Nacua 27.7% target share, Kupp 27.4%. We know that Kupp doesn't get as much of the downfield work as Nacua, and I like to bank on the downfield stuff more than red zone because it's more bankable. But Kupp's red zone workload was just wild. 40% in these relevant games with Nacua under 20%. Touchdown regression candidate, in quarterback. So I'm high on Kupp. I think that I can build lineups with maxing out at 7,000 with Kupp at receiver and still feel like I have some upside, especially with Kupp knowing what he's capable of. Still, you see those 100-yard games there, the red zone work. Love that. Drake London's my second love. This Falcons offense should be on the upswing. New offensive coordinator and Kyle Pitts dealing with a hamstring injury. So what?
Already.
Yeah. We want to talk about 10 targets being that sort of being the cutoff. 12 targets really elevating your 100-yard odds. Drake London could lead the position in targets this week, and I don't think anyone really bat an eye. Things should just get better. That lack of touchdowns just hurts in last year's game log, but with a new quarterback in town, I think that there's a lot to like. And London already led the team in target share last year. He's better than the touchdown tallies have ever been. And he hasn't had a 1,000-yard receiving season yet in either of his first 2. No more than 4 touchdowns. Everything's pointing to Drake London having a breakout season this year. My third love, yet another player who Jim yells at me about all the time, but Chris Godwin His salary is $5,600. If you need receivers in the 5K range, which I think if you have a receiver in the 5K range, it opens up a lot this week. I like Chris Godwin, yet another touchdown regression candidate, which is sort of a key part of my process, which if anyone didn't know, I'm trying to make that very clear. PFF has him with a top 10 week 1 matchup by receiver versus cornerback matchups. Their PFF also rating Washington their secondary 30th entering the season. Godwin had a 23% target share last year. Not a lot of yardage. I understand like potential upside concerns, but I kind of think that look at that. He's got a 12 target game there, 10 targets, 8. I think that he's a volume based play, and I think he might be the type of player who, with a little bit improved efficiency and better touchdown numbers, he's going to be more like 66 the rest of the season than 56. But of course, I could be wrong on that.
I mean, I yelled at you because his salary was like in the 6,000 range last year, and it's not. So
Yeah.
I think that's fair. Good matchup for him. I think Robert in the YouTube comments was talking about Baker Mayfield going off this week, and he thinks Baker could go off if, I think that does apply to Chris Godwin as well. So
Yeah.
I understand why you're here, and I'm not opposed to Godwin by any means. So your loves at receiver, Chris Godwin, Drake London, and Cooper Kupp. I thought about going Kupp for my first one as well. I want to go with Nico Collins. I think that slight preference for Kupp because that game is so fun, but also, and I know what his role will be because I've seen it, but also Nico Collins is not 80 years old and dealing with chronic hamstring issues. So that's a plus for him. Collins last year had the upside, got a lot of deep work. Played 21 of 23 snaps with the starters in the preseason, most of any of the top 3 receivers, that via Nate Yonke at Pro Football Focus, who does a lot of great work as far as tracking preseason usage. I don't think that'll change Collins, the downfield work stuff. He had a lot of yardage upside, playing indoors. Dusty Stephon Diggs, Tank Dell not out there for 2 receiver sets. So Nico Collins, $7,100, good exposure to a very fun game. I was not going to pivot off Drake London as my second one, despite the fact there was overlap. I'm going to keep him in there because that's a really low salary for a guy who could get a bunch of targets this year. This coaching staff historically has been pretty pass heavy. They come from the Rams system. Probably want to throw the football around quite a bit, and that's going to benefit Drake London, who has a much better quarterback this year. 23% target share in the games he played last year, 37% of the team's deep targets, and 29% inside the red zone. I could see a world where London's salary is pushing 8K at some point this year, and he's $6,700, so I want to get him while he's still down there. Final love for me is a guy I included in that Josh Allen, Bijan Robinson build earlier on. That's Jackson Smith-Njigba. His salary is $5,200 as the Broncos take on the Seahawks. And yeah, I yelled at you last year because he had a low ADOT. His role sucked, and that was not fun. But new change, new coaching staff, Ryan Grubb, their OC. He was a lot of fun to watch. He kind of led that Michael Penix, Roma Dunze, the full Washington thing last year. Tyler Lockett is already banged up. Smith-Njigba was on the field for the 2 receiver sets, according to, again, Nate Yonke of Pro Football Focus, tied to the best quarterback in football in Geno Smith. I don't love this game, but it's $5,200. It'll be the lone guy I have access to in this game. I'm kind of fine with that. So JSN, I think $5,200, a fine play to save some salary for this week. Maybe some Greg Dortch, who can say? I don't know. We'll consider that at a later date. Tight end, what you going with there?
Trey McBride, 6,400 in a game that we like. Again, you're a little higher on it, but he's going to be my favorite exposure at tight end to any game this week. I do think we need to allocate some salary at tight end because there are some names that can put up solid to really strong games. And again, I'm not really chasing the 100-yard games for tight ends. It's not something that makes a lot of sense, but McBride should see volume here this week in a game where either Cardinals, I mean, this is the case for any team. You're either competitive or you're not. But if they're not, he's going to see targets. And if they're competitive, it's probably because he's involved in doing things. In games with Kyler last year, he had a 25% target share, 27% red zone share. I don't really see the case necessarily for anyone else's, like the guy I want to get to primarily. And yet again, touchdown regression candidate, scored in those games with Kyler twice, but should have had 5 to 5.5 touchdowns last season. Second love is going to be Evan Ingram at 6,200. Yet another tight end who did not score a lot last year, 3 times, but there's some uncertainty, I'll say, around the receivers here. I don't think there's going to be uncertainty with Ingram's role. Team best 23.6% target share last year. Calvin Ridley leaving behind a 22.5% target share. They have players who can slot in. Gabe Davis, Brian Thomas Jr. I don't know what's going on with Christian Kirk, so I'm excited to see a week of data and kind of get that. But I'm not going to go at any of the receivers. Evan Ingram's going to be the way that I get exposure to the Jaguars. Although we threw out Bijan as like a don't forget about this, like make sure we get there. I think Travis Etienne is very, very appealing at running back too. So Ingram and Etienne, my 2 ways to get exposure to those bring back stacks for the Dolphins.
That is my list as well. Evan Ingram is one of my tight end loves, actually the same as you. So let's talk about Ingram first. You talked about how we're playing alongside Gabe Davis and Brian Thomas Jr. Neither guy is a proven target earner, which means the ball's got to go somewhere. And Evan Ingram earned a lot of those targets last year. 24% target share last year. Not a lot of deep work, but did have a 15% red zone share. So I want exposure to this game. I'll have Tua paired with Tyreek at times. Evan Ingram, the lowest salary tight end I feel good about. So I think that is a viable game stack here is Tua, Tyreek, or Waddle, honestly, at 72. Run it back with Evan Ingram. Maybe Tua with Devon Achane. I think that's the one quarterback running back stack that could stick. He did play out wide quite a bit during the preseason. So I'm receptive to all those Dolphins guys.
If Kyle Pitts is full by Friday,
I was going to ask you the same thing. Yeah.
Okay.
I think he's a consideration. I need it to be full by Friday though, and off the injury report entirely. What about you?
Yeah. I think the same.
Okay. McBride is my other one too. $6,400. I feel better about Ingram than I do about McBride personally. That might be dumb. I don't know. I'm worried about Marvin Harrison Jr. eating into his role a bit, but there's no Matt Milano here again for the Bills, and McBride does benefit from that. Could be a negative game script. Could be chucking it a lot. $6,400. He's talented.
These guys both should have 25% target shares.
That'd be great. I'm in. I mean, like, make the Cardinals
What
fun.
else are they going to do?
Yeah, make the Cardinals fun. Hey, Greg Dortch, 30% target share. So 25 plus 25 plus 30. Cool. Not a lot left for James Conner. My bags could be on fire. If I force you to use a lower salary tight end, could you name me one who you like or no?
Lower as in like
below 6,000.
I don't think I'd get to Njoku, although probably not Dalton Schultz. Did Brock Bowers practice yesterday?
He was limited, I believe. You skipped him.
No, I see what you're doing. I was just looking elsewhere first, but Taysom Hill might be the play below 6,000.
$5,500. Played at running back 5 snaps in the preseason. Played a quarterback in the preseason. I'm just saying, he can have upside games. Not a lot of tight ends can do that. Can I predict them? No. But is he more likely to have an upside game against the Panthers when they're at home and favored? Probably. So, I will have him in a lineup this week. I'll say that. I'll have Taysom Hill in a lineup. Might get to Juwan Johnson at 47. He's healthy now, played in the 3rd preseason game. But I'll have some Taysom this week if I need to really save at times.
Yeah, I think tight end's pretty bad this week.
That's part of the thesis. Yep.
So I want to make sure when there are players who we've seen with 20% plus target shares, specifically Ingram and McBride, I don't want to ignore that and play a true guessing game by saying Taysom Hill's like my favorite tight end. I can't get there.
Okay. Defense. What you going to there?
I'm going to go with the Falcons. They're at home against the Steelers, who could be improved, but not super threatened just yet. I don't think Atlanta's going to be like a top tier defense, but it's all about matchups. And just as a week 1 reminder, because I probably won't do a trend on this, the majority of FanDuel points for defenses come from sacks and interceptions, and that's relatively predictable. Whoever would be under center for the Steelers can take a lot of sacks. So I think that they're going to be a team that we maybe target a lot. in terms of opposing defenses, even if they've got some offensive efficiency. But those sacks are crucial for FanDuel points.
And their offensive line is already beat up. Like that's not a great omen for them. So I agree. The Falcons are my top option. If I were to give an alternative, it'd be the Chicago Bears. They are at home facing the Titans, and Titans are gonna throw the ball this year with Brian Callahan as their new coach. But should they with Will Levis at quarterback? Will Levis is fun, but he's also chaotic, and chaos leads to interceptions, leads to sacks. Those are things that are good for opposing defenses. So I think the Bears defense was pretty fun last year after they traded for Montez Sweat. They played very well down the stretch, did face some poor quarterback play in that time, but they might face poor quarterback play Sunday too. So I like the Falcons most. My top alternative, though, is the Chicago Bears at $4,000. Any final thoughts from you, Brandon, before we close up shop for this week 1 preview show?
You can always see things differently than we do, or different than consensus. Week 1's the best week to do that. There's probably a game or a quarterback, could be Kirk Cousins for all we know, saying, hey, pocket passers, etc. Sure. Week 1's the week to do it before we really get a great feel. With that said, I think you can build lineups and differentiate, especially with that extra game, Sunday Night Football on the slate. You don't have to overthink it. You don't have to get too cute and say like Denver Seattle stack is going to be what it takes. I don't think you got to do that this week. So do your thing, but you don't have to get too out there, I don't think.
I agree with that. Roster rate should be pretty flat. So play the players you want to play, find some ways to be slightly different without being stupid, and build your lineups based on that. That's all that we have here for today. As mentioned, though, back with you every Thursday live on the FanDuel YouTube page at 10 a.m. Eastern. If you're watching on YouTube, A, thank you. B, leave us a thumbs up. We appreciate all of you as always. Check us out on FanDuel TV Plus, FanDuel.com/watch, your FanDuel TV Plus app on your Amazon Fire, Apple TV, or Roku device, and of course on the FanDuel Research Podcast feed as well. Brandon, if people have questions for you on X, where can they find you there?
At Gdula 13, GDULA 13.
I am on X at Jim Sonis. You can find FanDuel Research on X at FanDuel Research. Want to thank you all for tuning in for today. Good luck to you with your bets in week 1, your DFS lineups as well. We'll talk to you once again next week. This has been the Heat Check, a FanDuel Research podcast.